إن الشيطان كان للإنسان عدو مبين. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. So these verses I just recited are from the chapter of Joseph, Surah Yusuf in the Quran. A surah that's very close to my heart, a surah that's been my source of solace and therapy and grounded me through thick and thin, and a surah after which I named my first child Yusuf as well, hence the name Abu Yusuf. It's not imaginary, it's a real kid called Yusuf. This surah, I just want to have 3 moments of contemplation with all of you, and then we can open the floor for questions, inshallah. So, what I wanted to reflect on with all of you is the 3 moments in which Yusuf, the Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam, overcomes an obstacle, overcomes a challenge, overcomes a really difficult moment in his life. And what is it that enables him? What's his superpower? What's the recipe for him to overcome the challenges that he comes across on his journey, on his path? The first dark moment, quite literally dark moment, in the UK we have this thing called puns. I don't know if you have them around here in Canada. But the first dark moment that Yusuf experiences is when he's in the well. He's been manhandled by his brothers, he's been lifted, he's been chucked into a well. And as he sat there in the bottom of the well, kind of just realizing what's just happened to him, and realizing that there's no easy way out. At this point in time, something remarkable happens, which is that Allah's first direct revelation to Yusuf occurs in this moment. Allah says in Surah Yusuf, وَأَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْهِ لَتُنَبِّئَنَّهُمْ بِأَمْرِهِمْ هَذَا وَهُمْ لَا يَشْعُرُونَ. As he sat there, wallowing in the pit of despair, and quite literally wallowing in the pit of this well, and he's thinking to himself, what on earth just happened to me? Allah reveals to him, this little boy, between the ages of 7 and 9, quite like my own son Yusuf, around that age, Allah reveals to him and he says, one day you will come back and you will tell these boys, you will tell your brothers what happened today. You will speak of this tale again, and they don't realize that I have a greater plan for you. Suddenly, this uncertain, fearful, terrified little boy in a dark well, who's just been plunged in there by his murderous brothers, he goes from a moment of anxiety and fear to a moment of solace and reassurance. It's very difficult when you have your dark moments in life to have that feeling of reassurance and to have that feeling of calm. But what will calm you in that dark moment is none other than wahi, that revelation from Allah. When Allah speaks to you, you see, often when we're down, when we're in the dumps, when we're nervous, when we're struggling, we talk to our friends, we vent, right? We go to spaces where we can go and we can kind of like let it all out, let it all go through. And yet after a venting session, sometimes we don't feel particularly better about ourselves. There's something in the secret recipe of revelation. There's something, dare I say, magical. There's something there that you can't describe that has a particular effect on the human mind and the human soul that can lift you out of that moment of darkness. And as the Prophet Yusuf is sat there in the well, the only thing that can really uplift him is wahi, is revelation from Allah. That Yusuf, one day, there's a greater plan at place. You're going to come back and you're going to narrate this story to them again. And suddenly this fearful boy is calm. That's moment number 1. The depths of the well, and he overcomes it, mentally at least, through the reassurance of revelation. The second moment in the life of Yusuf alayhi salam. He's in the palace. The palace is a far cry from the well that he was in a little while ago. He's in a happy place, right? He's being looked after, he's being honored, he's been fed well. Just imagine the kind of cuisine that they'd eat at the palace. Just imagine the kind of, the people with the fans on the side when he'd enter rooms. He's been looked after. And he's not being treated like a slave, he's actually being treated like an adopted son. He's been promoted, right? So from the slave market of Egypt, he's been adopted like a son. So he's in a very happy place. But then something goes wrong. Sometimes in the happy places, not in the dark wells, sometimes in the very happy places is when you see your next obstacles. He's in his happy place, and this lady the Queen of Egypt, as we say in the UK, she fancies him. I don't know if that's a familiar word for you guys. She likes the look of him, right? So the young boy, he hits puberty, becomes a young man, and suddenly he's very attractive to her. And she starts to pursue him. Now this is a lady who's used to getting whatever she wants. And so she tries everything. She tries the hints, she tries the subtle words. None of that, seems to not be getting the message. So one day she just ushers him into a room and locks the door. And she makes it very explicit. And she says something, a word, which has never been mentioned in the entire Quran. قَالَتْ هَيْتَ لَكَ, it's a seductive word which means come over here. Now a young man in a palace with an attractive, wealthy woman of status who's literally locked the door and invited him to come and enjoy himself. It's extremely difficult. It's an extremely difficult test, the test of temptation. The tricky thing with the test of temptation is you don't realize it's there sometimes. It doesn't feel like a test because it's quite enjoyable. It doesn't feel like a test because there's something delightful, there's something sweet, there's something juicy about it. In contrast with being in the dark well, it's very clear that this is the test. But this is where the second superpower, the second secret of Yusuf alayhi salam comes to fore. قَالَ مَعَاذَ اللَّهِ إِنَّهُ رَبِّي أَحْسَنَ مَثْوَايَ إِنَّهُ لَا يُفْلِحُ الظَّالِمُونَ. He says literally, مَعَاذَ اللَّهِ, God protect me. In a moment in which you lose your senses, you lose your ability to think, the seductive energy is pulling you from every corner, he remembers Allah. If this isn't a miracle, I don't know what a miracle is. To remember Allah in that moment. He remembers Allah, and the reason he's able to think of Allah and be conscious of Allah is because this is a man who's always in the constant memory. Allah is in his constant memory. Allah isn't a distant memory for him. He's current affairs. Allah is current affairs for Yusuf. He's always on his mind. And so it's really difficult to yank him away from that because this is a state of being. He's constantly in a state of dhikr, min al-dhakirin. He's somebody who remembers God frequently. Somebody who remembers God frequently, they are the ones who remember God in the times in which you're supposed to forget about Him. Think of people in Gaza, bombs dropping from the sky. Most of us would lose our senses, completely lose our identity, lose everything about us. And somebody in Gaza stood there with the falling missiles and saying, Allah will protect us. Whoa, how? Teach me, Gazan child, teach me how to remember Allah because I don't know how to remember Allah like you do. The Prophet Yusuf, in a moment in which he's supposed to lose his senses entirely, in a moment of seduction, he remembers Allah. The remembrance of Allah and the monotheism, that keeping Allah the number one priority in your life, Tawheed. This is the secret superpower to Prophet Yusuf being able to overcome the unwanted invitations from a very powerful and beautiful woman. قَالَ مَعَاذَ اللَّهِ. He says, God protect me from you. إِنَّهُ رَبِّي أَحْسَنَ مَثْوَايَ. My Lord has been looking after me. How can I betray Him? You see, often we equate it solely with a sense of fear. People say, fear God, fear Allah. He's not saying fear, he's not fearful at this moment, just fearful. He's saying, Allah's been so kind to me, how can I betray Him? How could I turn against Him? How can I trespass when He has treated me so beautifully? And then he says, people who trespass against God, they don't succeed. I think often we don't realize this equation, is that trespassing against Allah, it feels enjoyable in the moment, but there's always a knock-on impact. It's a domino effect in our life. You start to lose your sense of being. You start to lose blessing in your life. And you wonder what's happening. It's the sins, the accumulation of those sins. And the Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam says, look, I don't even want to get into it. وَاسْتَبَقَ الْبَابِ. They both run to the door. You see, and this is the beauty of intention. They're both doing the same thing. They're both running to the door, but one is running towards the obedience of God and the other one is running away from God. And his shirt gets ripped and the whole debacle takes place. But it is the moment of recalling Allah's sight of him that saves him from that moment of temptation. Fast forward again, moment number 3 in the life of Yusuf. Yusuf is in prison. This isn't a nice prison. This isn't like a postmodern nation state prison with like food and mashed potato and all the nice frills that you get in prison. This is an Egyptian dungeon from thousands of years ago, right? So there's no beds, there's no air conditioning. Yeah, this is a real dungeon. And Yusuf alayhi salam, he's stuck there for years. But before he gets there, he makes a very remarkable dua, a remarkable supplication, which I guarantee you has never been made before. And certainly nobody in this room has ever thought of making it. He says, God, I would like to go to prison. Prison is more beloved to me than remaining in this mode of temptation around these women. قال رب السجن أحب إلي مما يدعونني إليه. Oh Allah, I prefer prison to this beautiful palace. The palace of temptation always looks nice and juicy on the outside. But the prison where I can obey God in my own isolation, I much prefer that. This remarkable dua that he makes, most people would never imagine. Now he's in prison. 2 men come to him, asking him a favor, asking him to interpret one of their dreams. And the Prophet Yusuf, if it was you and me in a dungeon, that too in Egypt, pre-existence of falafel. Yeah, so the food in the dungeon is not great. And then 2 people in the prison are coming to ask you for favors. You say, listen, get lost. With all due respect, I got my own problems. I'm not here to serve you. Does this look like a Tim Hortons kiosk? Is there a menu somewhere? Like, who told you to come and get customer service from me? Don't talk to me. As they say in the UK, don't chat to me, bruv. Yeah, that's the door. That's how you and me would feel. Grumpy, annoyed, agitated. We're in a dungeon. Yusuf alayhi salam is in a dungeon, right? And these 2 men come to him asking him for help. And they say, نبئنا بتأويله إنا نراك من المحسنين. Please, can you help us? Because you are somebody of beautiful character. It just blows my mind. What does it take to have beautiful character in a dungeon? What does that look like? How helpful he must have been to the people around him. How kind he must have been to the people around him. How loving he must have been for them to feel welcome enough to come and ask favors of him. So now they've asked him for a favor. And he, in this prison, in this dungeon, he does them a favor. He interprets their dreams for them. But he goes above and beyond. And this is the thing about Yusuf. He never does the bare minimum. So they've asked him to interpret their dream, right? So he's supposed to just provide them that service. But no, he does one more thing. قال لا يأتيكما طعام ترزقانه إلا نبأتكما بتأويله قبل أن يأتيكما. He says, guys, before the dream interpretation thing, let's have some food. Come, let's munch. By the time the food comes, I'll tell you the dream interpretation. While waiting for the food, he sat there just chatting to these guys. He says, where are you guys from? Oh, really? You know where I'm from? I'm the son of Jacob, the son of Abraham. We are people who worship just one God. You know there are people who don't worship God? Crazy, right? Food's here. Let's eat. What's he doing? He's inviting them to Islam in the most subtle way. Through his hospitality, through his services, through his kindness. And then he introduces them to the core concept. There's only one God. This idea of tawheed, of monotheism, is what we all come back to. But look at the style, look at the grace that Yusuf alayhi salam possesses even in prison. These are the 3 moments I wanted to share with all of you, and I'll summarize them. In the well, Yusuf's superpower is his connection to revelation. That gives him the calm despite the darkness of the well. In the palace of temptation, with all the trinkets and the glittery objects, what he overcomes temptation with is the constant remembrance of Allah. In the prison, that dark, horrendous place that nobody wants to go to, that miserable, depressive place that nobody wants to be in, he overcomes all of that by going above and beyond for the sake of Allah. And those who go above and beyond, Allah goes above and beyond for them. And that reflects towards the end of his story. As a prologue, conclusion, the Prophet Yusuf, the end of the story, his family comes back from Egypt. They're all in one place. His dream comes true. And when his dream comes true, he's talking to his family and he's exclaiming, he's sharing his gratitude for this moment. Guys, look where I was, in the well, in the prison, and now my dreams come true. You're all back here. And in that moment, he retells the story of his life, but he misses out one detail. He doesn't talk about the well incident because he doesn't want to bring up something he forgave his brothers for again. He forgave and he forgot. When he's describing the horrible moment in his life, he says, وَقَدْ أَحْسَنَ بِي إِذْ أَخْرَجَنِي مِنَ السِّجْنِ وجاء بكم من البدو من بعد أن نزغ الشيطان بيني وبين إخوتي. Allah has been kind to me. By putting me in the well and dragging me through prison, Allah was kind to me. He reframes, this is how you overcome PTSD. He reframes his past traumas. He sees them in the light of God's wisdom. And this is really step one, the reframing process. To look at what happened to you in the past and to make peace with it. And then he says something. 4 words, which summarizes his source of strength. إِنَّ رَبِّي لَطِيفٌ لِمَا يَشَاءُ. My Lord is Latif, one of Allah's names. Al-Latif is the subtle in his ways. You don't realize it, but he's planning your promotion. You don't realize it when you're in the well, but he's planning your retirement and your pension fund. You don't realize it, but when you're injured, he's planning your recovery. He's subtly planning the next steps and you don't even realize. Allah is Latif, the gentle in his ways. It's the names of Allah and his attachment to Allah that gets him through these tests and these obstacles. So the first, the well, his relationship with revelation, reassurance through revelation. In the prison, in the palace, his constant remembrance of Allah. And then at the end, when he gets into the prison, it's his desire to go above and beyond al-ihsan. And these are the 3 moments from Yusuf's life I wanted to share with all of you. I hope there's something there for all of you to plan your lives. And I'll open the floor now to questions, thoughts, suggestions, and critique.